All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back. It is Dave, the Real Music Observer, observing real music in real time for real people just like you, right there, and yours truly right here. Billy Joel in a really cool, very long interview, which you can link to over at ultimateclassicrock.com, talks at length about some of the stuff that I've been talking about, in the sense that the music industry in the early 90s kind of went against him. And he decided that based on what he was looking at, he's a smart guy, that he wasn't going to record any more music. He said that he had pretty much written and composed everything he wanted to, but he noticed that on his album River of Dreams, which you would think probably one of the better albums he's ever done, and also he talked about how he believed, now this is Billy Joel talking about how his songwriting had gotten better on this album, and yet it was mostly rejected. Now, River of Dreams was a pretty large hit song, but mostly on adult contemporary stations. He had great music on this record. If you go back and listen to it from start to finish, you're going to find that there's not a bad song on it. And Billy Joel albums, honestly, and I was a huge fan. My favorite Billy Joel album was Glass Houses, because that's really when I was eating up music, and that album came out in 1980 and had a bit of a more rock sound for Billy and the whole thing, but it's a pretty diverse album. There are some quieter songs on that album, but I guess the spirit of it is more rock. Billy, though, has always been very diverse. I mean, he can sing a tune with Ray Charles, and then come back with something that's completely unexpected, more of a rock sound. Downeaster Alexa, stuff like that, which I thought very creative. Worked with Mick Jones on the Stormfront album. By the time we get to River of Dreams, though, I think he saw that the writing was on the wall. The kind of music that was getting airplay and was getting lauded as something, oh, this is creative and great, went against probably everything that Billy Joel was about. And he also talks about how he's having trouble singing these days. He says that most of the tunes that he wrote in his 20s and 30s, he's having some difficulty, holding those notes, and he has to lower the keys a little bit in some places. And he calls it like a pitcher who might be losing his fastball. You know how pitchers sometimes will start to throw junk, and they get good at throwing the junk and they fool the hitter. There's a correlation between maybe fooling the audience a little bit by singing or throwing junk rather than throwing the fastball. Billy, who is almost 70, is basically saying that when he gets to that point where he can only throw junk, or most of the time he's throwing junk, he's going to end up quitting or calling it a day. And this is pretty interesting to actually hear the truth. Typically, what I like about the interview is that Billy Joel doesn't say, well, I'm just, or ignore the fact that maybe he's not singing as well as he used to. He actually used the phrase, I'm struggling at times. I'm struggling. And that's, it's depressing how age does this, and how we're, just all mortals here. But the point being is that at least Billy Joel has the good sense to be honest about it. And one thing about Billy Joel, it's his New York attitude. It just comes out. He just tells it like it is. Whether you agree with him or not, he just speaks his mind. And I think that's an important attribute to anybody in whatever occupation you're involved with. Now, Joel again goes on to talk about how he didn't want to record anything else because he just felt that they weren't going to actually give him the kind of airplay and the kind of recognition that he deserves. And I agree 100%. People who continue to try to go on and just sort of buzzsaw through this and pretend that, oh, I'm just going to put out the same material I've been putting out, even though nobody's going to care about it. Folks, this has been happening for over a generation now. New artists are running into it now. At least the melodic rock type artists are putting out music that should be getting the time of day. I talked about Tony Lewis from The Outfield. He just released this incredible album, and who's playing it? You know, and I got DJ people that I know and talk to, and they're all like, yeah, well, we can't pull the trigger on this, you know. And I'm like, well, why? Why couldn't you add this to your format? Well, just give me a reason. Is it your audience is too stupid? I mean, seriously. Oh, they're just going to switch the channel. They're going to switch the channel when they hear a song that sounds like The Outfield from 1986. Okay, that's fine. So Joel goes on to talk about this in the music industry and how he really didn't have anything else to add to his canon, which, you know, he's Billy Joel. I think he probably could have, but I think the music industry ended up souring him on this, and it's a shame because he's one of the great composers. The interview is fascinating, though, because the more I read stuff like this, the more I'm convinced that some kind of music industry cabal happened. And look, you can tell me all day long how, you know, Pearl Jam and Soundgarden, all these groups were just the greatest thing. That's fine, but what did they do to the rest of the industry? Did they make it better? Did they make it more like user-friendly, like everybody from the whole spectrum could release stuff that would get thrown into the pot, much like it did in the 1970s, the 1980s? Pretty much everything got thrown into a pot, and now it's either really bad rap or techno pop or just overproduced. There's like 3 or 4 producers that are manufacturing artists and making this music all sound basically the same, and nobody has to pay any dues at all. It doesn't make sense. So Billy Joel, a great interview. Again, go over to ultimateclassicrock.com. There's a link to the interview. It's on a different site. I forget the name of that site. Might have been a magazine, but the interviewer asks a lot of questions, and Billy always usually gives a really good interview. And it's interesting, his opinion about like Elton John too. He says some things I think that are kind of interesting as well. But the Piano Man Speaks, one of the greats. If you have a chance to go see Billy in concert, his band puts on a great show, and you won't be disappointed. It's rock and roll history. I've never seen Billy Joel, so, you know, anybody want to get me tickets if he comes down to Florida, you know, feel free to send me a pair. All right, of tickets. I'll see you soon, everybody.